Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Greater Manchester Stories. This episode's guest is Paul Ponting, who has another incredible story that involves the police and some other things we're going to get into as well. Most people who contact me at the moment is all to do with Greater Manchester Police, which is shocking in itself. But if you're out there and you've got a Greater Manchester story, get in contact and let's discuss it on this podcast and let's get your story out there about how we need to improve our public services. So first of all, let me welcome Paul to the show.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for coming on. My first question is briefly tell the audience your story.
So in March of this year, a call was made to Bury Social Services, and the call was made by a person that is known to me and known to the police. And the call was to essentially harm another female who was a rape victim and make a false allegation against her and against myself. So the call was made to Bury Social Services. A name was provided, a phone number was left, and the allegations against the other female was that she was harming or putting her own children in harm's way, and saying that I had been arrested for having indecent pictures of children on my phone, which is obviously completely and utterly false. So that's basically the allegation. It was reported to the police, and that's where things all seem to fall apart.
Right. So in a nutshell, someone's made false allegations against you to Bury Social Services.
Yes.
And that then wasn't the end of it, was it? So
No.
Let's go into a bit more detail about that.
Okay, so because it involved another female, whose name I won't mention, she reported it to her local police force, which was GMP. Because it involved me and she'd notified me, I reported it to my local police force, which is Lancashire Police. Lancashire Police, because it was a GMP related crime, referred it back to GMP. So it was essentially all being investigated by GMP, but via two different departments. So the other victim, the other female, she had a house visit because of her status as a rape victim. She had adult services come to her house, and the officer in charge was a an inspector, Andy Wright of GMP, and he told her that they had identified the caller. They traced the call back to us, an individual, a female, and that female was responsible for the call and had been spoken to by the police. The victim didn't want the police to pursue it, but she felt a threat because the female who made the call, if this was getting complicated, knew where she lived. However, I still wanted to pursue it from my perspective, as it was a malicious communication. So GMP contacted me, not knowing that they'd already contacted the other victim, and told me that the call was anonymous and that they couldn't trace it. I took matters further. I went higher up. I ended up getting to an inspector, Paul Mycock of GMP, who was no use. It went all the way up to a superintendent. His name was Muzemil Kanane, I think his name is, Superintendent Kanane. And he assigned a police officer to investigate for me. That went on for a long time, and eventually they looked at the evidence. They checked it all and basically said they're not even going to investigate it and closed the case down. So that's kind of the nutshell of the police investigation.
Right. So malicious communication, false allegations, the police have partially looked into it and then went, we're taking this no further, and they've now closed the case.
Essentially, yeah, but they closed the case saying that they said they didn't interview the suspect or the person who made the call. They never interviewed that person, and basically closed the case down, which is very suspicious because the call was absolutely malicious communications. But at the time when the police first told me that they wouldn't investigate, I'd made a formal complaint to GMP about it. And the irony is when I made that complaint, that was before the police had confirmed who made the call. They traced the call. This was CID who had traced the call. The complaint came back last week, and a Detective Inspector Amanda Hardy of Greater Manchester Police Professional Standards Department stated categorically that she had personally liaised with CID. She'd liaised with all the officers in charge and in fact spoken to and liaised with Bury Social Services And at this point in time, she's now saying that it's being confirmed that the call was anonymous. This is after GMP have already confirmed that the call is identified and the person has been spoken to. So it looks like they've lied in PSD.
Lied, incompetence, either way, it's appalling. So the question I want to ask then was, if let me play devil's advocate. So let me put a police hat on for the moment and say, right, yes, there was malicious communication, someone's made false allegations against you, but do you know what? In the grand scheme of things, when we're trying to fight knife crime and organised crime and drug dealing and kids being stabbed, we haven't got the resources, the time, the inclination to look into hurty words on the internet, lying about you to social services. That's why we're not going to pursue it any longer. If they said that to you, what would your answer have been then?
Well, my answer would be slightly different, because there would be an element of honesty about the police, saying that they are under-resourced, and I have no doubt that they are under-resourced. But to lie about an investigation is where it kind of crosses a line. But the other thing is the amount of time that the police seem to be spending in what I would say is covering this up. You know, they're going through professional standards and they're writing reports and doing all these parallel investigations. You know, if they were to just say, let's get the suspect in, let's interview her under caution and prosecute her if she doesn't have a reasonable defence. That's all I ask. And that potentially is a very, very short process to undertake by the police, whereas they've got people investigating from the other victim's perspective, people investigate from my perspective, mixed stories, different teams investigating the same thing, and then there comes the lies and tries to, you know, hide what one said, or as you say, it's completely incompetence. But how can professional standards honestly say that they've liaised with Bury Social Services and CID and come to a different conclusion that I've got in an email? I've got an email from Andy Wright, Detective Inspector Andy Wright, saying that the suspect is identified. So there's a lie somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this is what annoys people. It's not that these services can't cope and won't give you a service. It's the perception of the lying, the incompetence, the being led down a false path. This is what annoys people, because if they were completely open and honest at the beginning, going, we haven't got the resources to look into this, at least then you would know. You'd still be unhappy, and rightly so, but at least then you would know and understand why they're doing what they're doing. You might disagree with it, but at least you'd understand. It's when you feel there's dark forces involved and why they're doing this and why they're doing that. That's unacceptable. The main reason why I wanted you on the show was for the next part of this story, because this is the bit that shocks me the most. What we just discussed, I can fully understand, because I've worked with the police, I've worked with councils, I've seen the incompetence, but this bit now is sinister. So you wrote an email to one of the police officers, and I read, you've sent me the email. It was rude. And it was rude, as I mean, it wasn't overly rude. You used the words, once you used the word bullshit, and once you used the word shithouse. They're the only two things I can find in the email that somebody could point to and go, you really shouldn't have said that. And so you sent a police officer that email criticizing the force and them using those two words. What happened then?
Well, a small amount of backstory, and I won't sort of go into this too much, but I had a long previous conversation with the same officer by email, who had let me and my wife down because my wife had been, her life had been threatened, and we didn't feel he was doing everything he could. He certainly wasn't doing everything he could to investigate that. And it led into a point where we ended up having to make a formal complaint against him. And this email then followed on from that, because he had sent an email again, which was totally disagreeable. So I'd sent him this email, as you explained, had a couple of, you know, rude words, and he responded with an email, and I can read it out if you want. It's quite brief, or shall I paraphrase? He said, the contents of your email below constitute a criminal offence under the Malicious Communications Act 1988 due to its offensive nature. If you send any further offensive and abusive communications, the consequences will almost certainly be your further arrest and prosecution. I have recorded your email below as a crime, which on this occasion chosen to finalise with no further action in the hope that this was a one-off incident. So he basically has recorded a criminal offence on my personal record on the police system of malicious communications, which it doesn't amount to. And that's on my record and would affect any DBS checks in the future because I used what you classed earlier as a hurty word. I said bullshit.
Bullshit and shithouse. So what that means now is you're not allowed to say those words to police officers.
No, this is almost like a precedent that GMP have set, that if you say to a police officer bullshit, in my words, I said you're speaking bullshit and you're a shithouse for the actions you've taken. If you say them words, that is an indictable offence. And that means you can go to prison for malicious communications. It's an indictable offence.
Right. So he sent you that email. What did you do then? Because if I was in your position, I'd sit there going, I'm not having this.
Exactly. And people will know that I don't take lightly to things like this from the police. So I told them it wasn't an offence. And I stated the legislation, which says that for to be malicious communications, it has to be grossly offensive. And there is quite a lot of case law that states what grossly offensive is. And it basically says it must be more than just offensive. Now, obviously, Inspector Paul Mycock, who committed this act against me, he said it was an offensive email. So straight away, his own words, his own declaration of what my comment was offensive, doesn't meet the criteria for malicious communications. I reported to his superior, which is Chief Inspector Richard Arthur, and he supported Inspector Mycock, saying that it was his own personal opinion that he felt it was a malicious communication. So he basically has the power as an inspector to portray his opinions into the police system to harm my personal record. I've also took it further to Superintendent Kinane, who also stands by the recording of the crime. He said, yes, I agree, it should be recorded. And he went on to quote the National Crime Recording Standards or statistics. Again, I've responded to Superintendent Kinane, telling him exactly how that's false as well, because the NCRS, National Crime Recording, clearly states that there has to be an offence made out in law. And as I pointed out with the legislation, no offence is made out in law at all. So basically, I'm stuck with this on my record.
Let me ask you a follow-up question on this, because people might be thinking this. How many of these emails did you send to that officer?
One.
So this wasn't a 9-week campaign every day, a different insulting, rude email. This is one email you sent.
One email is sent to the officer, who I believe was frustrated because he was already the subject of a complaint for other actions to do with the social services call, which he's failed to investigate properly. So yeah. It seems almost like he was, vengeful.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, he's human. Your email might have been annoying to him. He may be sick of your case. He may not like you. He may have found your email insulting. But as a professional police officer, none of that should cloud your judgment. You need to be professional at all times, and all you do is enforce the law, not your feelings, not your interpretation of the law. You enforce the law as it's written in statute.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, he knows it wasn't a crime, because as an inspector, he will know what malicious communications is. So he will know that that's not a crime. And that begs the question is, this wasn't just a small mistake by a police officer. This is an inspector in the police, 3 ranks up from a PC, who knows the offence is not made out, and in my opinion has abused his power given to a police officer to record crimes on a system. So he's used his power, or abused his power, to harm me, and the police will not do anything.
Have you spoken to the Bad Law Project?
No.
I would Google them and drop them a line through their website.
Yeah.
And explain your story in bullet points, because they're always looking for cases to take on, and this basically is a free speech issue here.
Yeah.
And I think I would speak to them, because if they take this on, then you're laughing, you're going to get some decent help and support.
Yeah,
If they don't take it on, what else are you doing now? Have you made an official complaint through GMP procedures? I
yeah.
know you've complained to different senior officers, but have you logged an official GMP complaint?
Yeah, so I've made an official complaint to GMP, which I'm waiting on the outcome. I've also contacted the data compliance department, who's come straight back at the very start and just said we're not removing it. I've taken legal advice from a well-known law firm in Liverpool, and they have backed me all the way. The solicitor has said yes, the email was rude, but no, it wasn't a crime.
Hmm.
Pretty much the words I've said, and they are supporting me now to the point where they've advised me to make one more formal complaint to the data compliance, and if that fails, then the solicitors are going to back me through to a judicial review of the decision. So this will be against the chief constable of Greater Manchester Police.
Yeah.
So the judicial review should and most likely will overturn that decision and have that expunged because there was no offence committed.
Right. Well, you know what you're doing, which is great, and I'm glad you're sticking up for yourself as well, because
Yeah.
the reason why they do this is because they know 99.9% of people just take it on the chin, don't know what to
Walk
do.
away.
They put barriers in your way with the complaint procedures, and this is a long, hard fight to achieve anything. They know that, and they
Mm-hmm.
try to wear you down. That's why they stick up for each other, knowing you're just going to
Yeah,
disappear in the next couple of months, mate. And then so we would have won. But when we allow these organisations to run to over not overcome to run roughshod over our rights
yeah,
as citizens, then if they can do that to you over this, what else are they going to do to somebody else over something a lot more important
exactly.
than this? So this isn't just about your email. This is about the precedence it sets that the uh, police, judge, and juror all at the same time,
Yeah,
and you never took you to court, never asked you for your explanation. It's like, no, mate, we've found you guilty, and you've got a black mark on your record now, and
exactly.
that's taught you a lesson, hasn't it? You'll watch what you say and treat us with a bit more respect next time you're dealing with us because we can hurt you, and
Hmm.
that's not the sort of police force we want in this country.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a total abuse of his power. He could have quite easily said, tone it down a bit, or, I'm not going to engage if you're going to speak like that. I get all that. The email was purely born out of frustration because of the lack of support by the police. And dare you criticize them in any way, you then get shot down and criminal. It wouldn't surprise me if they tried to arrest me over it. But you're right, it is going to be a long, hard battle. I'm not going to give in. They will know that I won't give in. And they can either fight it publicly, because it will be public, or they can just admit they've done something wrong, remove the mark off my record, and everybody moves on. It's entirely up to them, balls in their court.
Well, either way, I hope you get the decision you want. I hope it is removed from your record. Um, Good luck in your fight. Thank you for
Yeah,
coming on the show. And when you have this resolved, will you let me know and come back on, and then we can get into some of the more of the nitty gritty of this particular part of it.
absolutely will do. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers, Nick. Thank you. Bye-bye.